how do we even get into the room to be interviewed? What gets us the opportunity? Especially, we're talking about being a young coach and trying to get a head coaching job. What are the key things to help you get into the room when you don't really have a big resume that's going to put you at the top of a stack of people that are applying for a job?
I always tell young coaches this: it is not what you know, it is who you know.
Yeah.
I know that's an old cliche, but it is so true. You want to network as much as you can. Go to as many coaches clinics as you can. Go to all those events you can go to. Shake hands, kiss babies, get to know people. Have some mentors.
Yeah.
If you're under a head coach, work with that head coach. Let them know, I want to be a head coach one day. What do I need to do? Who do I need to talk to? And I even encourage people, reach out to other athletic departments. When you go and play a school, you're playing your rival school or you're playing somebody in your conference, go meet the athletic director, go meet the principal, because one day that job might be open. And if you've created a great first impression, you might get your foot in the door for an interview. So it's those little things. Don't underestimate networking and really leaning on people, in your corner. But also, be a good representative when you are a young assistant. If you are an assistant, everywhere you go, just imagine that one day that could be my boss. What impression do I want to leave them with? If you're on the bench acting crazy, chirping at the refs, talking crap to players, you probably are not going to get an interview there. But I think another thing is help your program have success, right? If your program is having success and you're an assistant coach, that's going to help you get your foot in the door, because people are going to ask, whoa, what are they doing over there? Okay, if we can't get the head coach, who's the next best thing? Can we get one of those assistants? So I would say those two things: network and then provide value and help your program be successful.
Yeah, I think relationships are number one if you're trying to get a job before you've really built yourself a coaching track record or reputation. And I've told this story before, so I'll keep it pretty short. But my first head coaching job that I got, I really didn't have any connections to the district. And one of my mentors connected me up with some people that were very intertwined at the school that I was going for the head coaching job. And the school kind of had their sights set on a different candidate who ended up passing on the job. They offered him the job and he passed on it. But the way that I got into the room and made an impression on those people is because my mentor introduced me to people that were important in that school district. And I made an impression on them to the point where they said, okay, if we can't get the guy we wanted, let's at least take a look at this kid, because it seems like there's a lot going on there. So I would say relationships and, doing your work and thinking about that ahead of time is one thing, but you don't really know what you can fall into until you start getting on the phone and asking around and trying to get people to help you, particularly when you're a young person. A lot of people want to help you, but they don't know how to help you unless you kind of frame up what they could do for you. So I think relationships are number one. I think reputation can really get you in a room, and how you would do that as a young coach is just like what you were talking about. If you're a part of success that another head coach is having, you get viewed through that lens. So you're working at a school district, that head coach and that program is doing well, and you're like the lead assistant. That really positions you into a position where you can take credit for some of that success, even if you were just in an assistant coaching role. And then I think a lot of the things that we've talked about already, which is kind of preparation before the interview process to make you stand out. How are you different in your resume and cover letter that you send in? How are you different in how you communicate with the school? Can you get somebody in that community to call in and say, this kid's worth taking a look at, or something like that? How can you position yourself as different than what your resume might indicate as you apply for the job? So, Coach, real quick before we get back to the video, if you're looking for detailed basketball coaching guides, check out the Matt Hackenberg Basketball Store. I've built resources on offense, on defense, on program building, and much, much more. Thousands of coaches from all over the world are using these guides to help build their teams and build better programs. Check out the link in the description. We'll read through it and we'll stop and talk. And if there's things we've already talked about, we can skip over them. But I think this will bring up a lot of good things. The thread says, a veteran AD left multiple head coaching interviews thinking the same thing. How are these guys this unprepared? Same mistakes, different candidates. So number one here is know the school, not just the job. Every school has a culture beyond wins and losses. If you don't know the school, you don't know the job. So my question to you is, how much research are you doing on the community that you're going into to sell yourself as the head coach?
A ton. Know who the superintendent is, know who the principal is, know their school structure, know their school's philosophy. If they have a website, peruse the website. I'll tell you a story. This isn't me. This wasn't my personal story, but it was a coaching friend of mine. He went into an interview and it was a smaller school. We're in Indianapolis, and Indianapolis has a good tradition outside. There's small towns that love basketball. It is tradition based. Yeah. And so he went and interviewed. And one of the first questions they asked him, he said, "Hey, you're from Indianapolis. We're kind of a small community. Do you know who's in our conference?"
Yeah.
And he couldn't name the teams in their conference. And I think that was just like an instant, probably eliminator for him is, they're like, hey, you want this job, but you don't really know this community. You don't really know, who we're playing, things like that. Those are things you need to know. So yeah, know who their conference is, know what other sports at the school are successful, know history about the school and the community. Like the more research you can do, the better. If you go in knowing the schools, knowing the people within the school, it's definitely going to help you.
Yeah. And I think that this isn't like, if you know this information, it's not going to get you the job. But if you don't know the information, it can be a huge turnoff to the people that are making decisions. Even if something something like if you put the wrong logo on these portfolios that you're presenting to the committee, something like that can just kind of stick with them and make you a less appealing candidate. But number 2 in this thread, never criticize the previous coach. Explain your philosophy, not their failures. Respect signals maturity. Complaint signals risk. I've definitely found this all through life, is that when people tend to complain to me, all I think about is, if I'm involved with you, you're going to be complaining about me to somebody else at some point. So I know we touched on this a little bit. Do you have anything else to say about, not being critical of the previous regime at the school you're interviewing for?
You don't know who knows who, right? Like, you could be talking to the principal and he could be best friends with the former coach, right? You never know who knows who. So that kind of goes back to the framing part of just frame things as a positive. Hey, I can't speak to the previous regime, but here's what we're going to do. Here's how I'm going to be, myself, and be different.
Yeah, the next one, number 3, be ready for basic questions. You must clearly answer, what is your coaching philosophy? If you can't explain it clearly, you probably don't have one. And this really touches on what I was talking about earlier, which is like, I don't go into interviews thinking about what specific questions they're going to ask me. I want to just have clarity on my coaching philosophy, and I can choose how to deploy it at the right time.
I'll tell you, one of the hardest questions that people get tripped up on is just tell me about yourself.
Yeah.
Give me the elevator pitch. Give me the minute-long elevator pitch on you.
Yeah.
And people, like you said, they get nervous, they ramble, they don't know how to be concise and pointed about what they're trying to say, and then they end up giving a 3-minute long answer. So, sometimes those simple questions, can trip you up, and you need to be prepared for that.
Number 4 here, say enough, then stop. Over talking hurts more candidates than under talking. Answer the question. Don't volunteer your weaknesses. Silence is better than damage. And I definitely felt this with my interview experience. Is the more comfortable I got, the better I was able to answer questions and not over answer questions where I felt like I was kind of rambling to fill time when I was nervous. As I got more mature and got more experience, I was really able to answer questions more appropriately. But I think there's an important thing laying in the weeds here, which is don't volunteer your weaknesses. And what you want to be able to do is, everybody that goes into an interview committee is going to have some kind of weakness, and the interview panel is going to try to tug on that a little bit. You don't want to put it in the forefront. Let them kind of push it in the forefront. But when they do, you need to have a plan to explain away your weaknesses. Any strategy on approaching, when any weakness in your resume comes up, how you would handle that?
Yeah. I think that goes back to framing. I know I keep bringing that up, but you can frame a weakness into a positive. Right. And I'm not talking like the old Michael Scott, like, I care so much. My only weakness is I care too much, like not that framing, but framing as like a personal example. My first 3 years as a head coach, we had a losing record. So if you go into the next interview, they might ask you that. They might say, hey, your first 3 years you had a losing record. Tell us about that. So they're testing you to see how you respond to that. And you can frame that into a positive. Yes, hey, we didn't have the success that we planned for and that we worked for, but it really, really helped mold me as a coach. I learned so much in those 3 years that have now benefited me. And then as you see year 4 and year 5, where we did have success, it was because of what we learned in those first 3 years. So there's a way to frame it into something better, even if it comes across as a weakness in your resume or on paper.
Yeah, there's strategies that I talk about deploying in this interview, and I call it pivoting and flipping. And what you're trying to do with the pivoting is, if they ask you about something like this, you're going to give your answer for it, but then you're also going to sandwich that into something that's very much a positive of what you're trying to do or what you have done, or maybe how that weakness led you into having a certain amount of success in a different area of program building. And then flipping is exactly what you said, where, not in the Michael Scott way of my weaknesses, I care too much about my employees, but you're able to turn, weaknesses into positives, and you're able to show the experience that you gain from that as a positive, and not just let the thing dwell on whatever the weakness is. So moving on, we talked about this already a little bit. Your opening answer matters. Tell us about yourself. I think a lot of people come into this and they might, start from the beginning and tell, you really don't want to do that. You want to frame yourself how you want the committee to see you. And that's your vision for the program, and that you're a builder of programs, as opposed to, I played college basketball, or I was all Ohio as a, in my senior year of high school, or things of that nature. Anything to add on this? Tell us about yourself opening to an interview.
Yeah, I think they want to see that you're a good person, that you are somebody that can fit into the school and the community. So I wouldn't shy away from, talking about your family. Hey, I'm a father. I have 2 daughters. I really care about being a good father. I have a super supportive wife. Like, you don't have to tell your whole life story, but they do want to see other aspects of you besides coaching as well. So you may tell them, hey, I come from a family of coaches, or here's why I grew up wanting to be a basketball coach. I had a mentor. You can give a story, and like you said, you can tell the narrative that you want to come across in the interview. And I think that's important too, is it doesn't always have to be strictly basketball. Sometimes they want to know, are you a good person? Do you care? Do you have a family? What are your, personal beliefs, things like that. So I wouldn't shy away from that. And I wouldn't, like you said, ramble and tell your whole life story. I was born on August, the 5th, don't go into that, but just be very concise about, hey, I'm a father. I have 2 daughters. I really care about that. And that's why I coach this way. And like I said, you can flip that into your coaching philosophy. I want to treat every kid like I would want my daughters treated on the basketball court, right? Like the way that you say those things can really help dictate the narrative of how the interview goes.
Yeah. And what I take away from what you just said is, you can go on the offensive about the things that make you, you. You don't have to sit in the interview and be completely reactionary to, they asked me this, I answer this. You want to be able to insert the things that make you unique, make you special, that show what you care about. And definitely, talking about being a family person or something like that, that's going to connect with people on the panel. So the next one here, coach number 6, confidence doesn't equal arrogance. Great coaches acknowledge their weak areas. Humility builds trust. Arrogance tends to break it. And I have some interesting thoughts on this, because when you're in an interview setting, what you don't want to be is boring, but you also have to make sure you don't cross a fine line of being arrogant. So you want to be memorable to the interview committee, especially if you're like in a first round of interviews where they might be bringing in 7 or 8 different people. You have to kind of make yourself stand out in some way, but you don't want to make yourself stand out and come across as arrogant. But you definitely don't want to be so boring that it's like, what was that coach's name? The guy who came in second. You have to make yourself memorable to an extent. So,
quick question, coach. Do you have a full system or just a collection of plays? If you want a real system, check the link in the description to the Matt Hackenberg basketball store.
About walking this kind of fine line between confidence and arrogance.
Yeah, you definitely want to come across as confident and believing in yourself. If you are questioning or second guessing yourself, they're going to second guess, you as a candidate. But I also think, you have to toe the line. You don't want to come across as a know-it-all or I have all the answers. And I've been asked straight up, I've been asked in interviews, tell us about time you messed up.
Yeah.
And you don't want to say something that's eliminating, oh man, I totally messed up this thing. It ruined our program. You never want to go down that route, but you also want to have an answer that shows that you are willing to learn from a mistake. You're willing to work with others. You're willing to adapt and change for the better. So you have to be prepared for that. But I definitely think, I would say part of confidence is being genuine, being comfortable in your own skin and not trying to be like somebody else. Just be you. And at the end of the day, if they want you, that's awesome. It worked out. And if they don't, the next school might want you. So don't try to be somebody else. Just go in and be genuine, be confident. I think that helps in the interview process.
Yeah, I think this kind of segues into the next meme that I wanted to show here. And what we're looking at here is you finally get to coach your interview for the head basketball coaching job, and your interview number 412. There's 411 other guys who also want to build a championship culture. And the conversation that I really wanted to spark with this meme here is the idea of not really concerning yourself with the settings of the interview and who else is coming in and the number of people that are coming in. You really just got to kind of focus on your vision, your philosophy, what you can bring to the program, as opposed to trying to, figure all the behind the scenes out. Who else is coming in? Do I have a shot again? Oh, I can't get the job if that guy's going for it too, or something like that. Talk to me a little bit about just framing this in your own mind, where it's you against you trying to do your best job in the interview setting, as opposed to worrying about all the other noise surrounding the job.
Absolutely. Yeah. You can drive yourself crazy. You're calling people, hey, who else is interviewing? Oh, how did he do on his interview? Or what's the board saying about this guy? You can legit drive yourself crazy with that. And like I said, I think you have to really go into it, put your best effort forward, and be okay living with the results. I was as prepared as possible. If they like what I'm selling and they like my philosophies and what I want built in this culture, that's great. And there's been times where I've done great interviews. I've walked out and been like, man, I did awesome there. And I didn't even come close to getting the job. Right. And then there's times where you walk out and you're like, I did my best. I don't know how they felt. And then you hear back and they're like, we loved you. You are our best candidate. We want to hire you. So like I said, I think you have to just be concerned with yourself. I know that's cliche, control the controllables. We always say that as a coach, but it's so true when you get into the interview process. It's just all you can do is control how you do, what you believe in. And if the school, wants that, they want it, but you can't concern yourself with other people and how they're doing and what else is going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, I think I echo what you say. And I think the last thing you want to do is just put so much pressure on yourself where you feel like you need this job that you're going, this is my dream job. This is the job I've always wanted. That'll probably come across in your interview. You've got to, position yourself just to be, whatever the outcome is, the outcome is. And if it's a job I don't want and they offer it to me, I'll think about it then. If it's a job I really want, it doesn't really matter. I'm going to do the best I can. If I get offered it, then I'm in position to do that. So let's get kind of back into this thread here, coach. And the next one is make it about the program, not you. They're not hiring dreams. They're hiring solutions. Talk less about what the job does for you and more about what you'll do for the job. And I just was talking to my dad about an hour ago, and I told him I'm going to do, I'm doing a show tonight. We're talking about how to ace the interview process. And I said, what's your best advice for acing the interview process? And he said, tell him you're going to win a state championship. That's what I always did. And that's funny. But I think that you really, you need to have some of that confidence level for wherever you're going. And it might not be state championship, but the point is like whatever their next hurdle that they need to cross is, you want to be positioning yourself as a solution to getting over that next hurdle. And if it's a program that's been a graveyard program, you're probably not going in there and saying, we're going to win the state championship. But the next step for that program, I think, is important, that you're positioning yourself as I'm a solution to get us to that next step. So any thoughts here on this idea of
they want to hear how you're going to help the school, help the athletic department, help the program. Personal benefits are great, but you don't want that to be the main reason you're interviewing. I've seen a lot of coaches where maybe they live in the district and they sell it as, we live here, this is going to be great for my family, and that could be true, but that you don't want that to be the main reason you're interviewing. That doesn't necessarily help them, right? Like that is a good thing. That's a positive. It could be a benefit that you live in the district or live in the area, but you want to also sell the fact that I'm coming in to be a part of the school. I'm coming in to help, develop these young men or these young women. I'm coming in. They want to hear about how you are going to help the school in the program, not just about how it helps you personally.
Yeah. So the next one in this thread, ask for clarification if you don't understand a question. Guessing shows insecurity. Clarifying shows professionalism. Any thoughts on this before we move on?
Yes, you might get asked a question that's not even related to basketball, or you
Yeah.
might not quite understand what they're asking. One interview I was asked, "What does equity mean to you?"
Yeah.
Right, and like that was the question. And so right off the bat, I could have just went into an answer, but I clarified. Are you speaking academically? Are you speaking in athletics? What area of equity are we talking about here? And as you get clarity, you start to get a better understanding of what question they're asking and why they're asking it.
Yeah.
And I think that helps you provide a better answer than just as soon as they ask a question, you just go straight into an answer.
Yeah.
Sometimes you asking a question gets you to slow down, gets you to think about what are they asking and what's the best way to answer this question.
Yeah, I like what you said there. Number 9 is silence is a weapon. A few seconds of thought beats a rushed answer every time. Pausing shows composure. Rambling shows panic. We've talked about this a little bit too. But I definitely think that, when you're in these interview settings, if you're feeling the pressure, you definitely just want to, you don't want to be rushing. When you're rushing, you tend to just keep going. At least I do. I think you want to really be able to control tempo, just like you would as a coach. If you're trying to control the tempo of a game, you kind of want to control the tempo of an interview where you're not just firing off before you've been real thoughtful about what you're saying here. Number 10, bring proof of preparation, not just talk. Bring materials, coaching philosophy, off-season plan, conditioning outline, prepared coaches show, not tell. And, this is a lot of the conversation that we've already had is, this coaching portfolio idea and clarifying. Anything else to say on being prepared with proof?
Yeah, actually, I'll go back to number 9.
Yeah.
A book that I encourage all coaches to read is called Never Split the Difference. It's by a guy named Brad Voss. He's a hostage negotiator. And he really dives into the psychology of pressure situations. Like a hostage situation is the most pressure-filled situation there can be, probably.
Yeah.
And he really talks about the psychology and how to answer questions, how to get more information. So going back to number 9, like silence is the best weapon. If they ask you a question, one of the best things you can say is, "It sounds like you have a reason for asking that." And then sometimes they will dispel information that helps you, right? If they say, "Hey, what are you going to do to raise money?" And you just jokingly say, "Hey, it sounds like you have a reason for asking that," they will tell you, "Oh yeah, we've had really, bad trouble with finances."
Yeah.
And they kind of will dispel information that helps you, answer the question in a better way, or it gives you the logic or the reason behind the question. So yeah, Never Split the Difference is a great book. I highly encourage coaches to read that.
Yeah, and that brings up an idea of like if you're interviewing for a specific job, they just had a basketball coach, and that basketball coach is not there anymore, and there's probably a reason for that. And it could be left on good terms, it could be left on bad terms. You certainly want to understand that. And typically, what happens in these coaching cycles is there's a coach that was there. They left the community or the program short in some kind of way, particularly when these situations end badly. And the community is kind of looking for the opposite of that with their next hire. So you want to kind of understand that. And I can think very specifically of jobs that I went for where I knew there were some issues with the outgoing coach, and they asked me in indirect ways how I would handle situations that were like what the previous coach went through and kind of failed the community. So I think, when you're doing your research, we talked about that, earlier in the show, understanding kind of the setting that you're walking into in terms of what the previous regime was like and what complaints the athletic director probably got about the previous regime, and probably being able to kind of put those to rest with how you think about building a program, I think is really key. Any thoughts on that, Coach?
Yeah, it goes back to, like you said, don't be negative too much when it comes to the previous coach or situation. Like you said, you don't know what they did that might have been wrong, but you also don't know who's in their corner. And there could be a school board member that's on the board that loved them and didn't want to see him go. So if you come in bashing them and saying negative things, that might end up hurting you. So yeah, you have to be very measured about how you approach the previous regime.
Yeah, this segues right into number 11 here. Expect hypothetical questions. These questions usually come from real past issues. Think first, answer carefully. Your response will be taken seriously. Yeah, the hypothetical questions are usually directly drawn from past experience where there was a failure within the program. And, if you're saying you would handle the situation the same way that angered everybody in the community when the previous coach did it, that's a real bad look there. So last one here in the thread, always ask questions. When the interviewer asks, do you have any questions for us? Always say yes. Thoughtful questions show preparation and investment. Do you have any standard questions that you would ask the interview committee?
Part of my portfolio was I would actually have my questions listed out. And so going, once the interview's over, do you have any questions? I'd say, yeah, hey, on the last page, here are my questions. And I would really go into things like, what do you see me doing in the school? What will be my day-to-day job?
Yeah.
I would go into the basketball program specifics. Hey, is there a dedicated account? Is there a parent club or a fundraising club? How, and really dive into those questions. We talked about that on a previous stream, but I think you want to get those answers and hear it from the people that are involved, the admin. So I would put those questions to paper, and I might change it specific to the school that we're going to or the school that I'm interviewing with, but I would actually have those answers written out because, like you said, once you get into an interview, your mind's all over the place. You may forget the questions that you wanted to ask. And I think having them on paper shows that you are prepared, that you're serious, and that you have questions that are legitimate and that you want to know before you would take that head coaching job.
Coach, this isn't just YouTube fluff. Thousands of coaches around the world are using my products to help build real systems and real programs. If you want in, the link is in the description.